The Valen Empire had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years, and Admiral Vex had never seen anything that could challenge their might. From the command deck of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Dominion's Fist, he watched the stars bend around them as they traveled through hyperspace. His fleet of 12 warships moved in perfect formation, each vessel carrying enough firepower to destroy entire worlds. The alert came at 0800 hours ship time. A small vessel had been detected drifting near the Kepler Nebula, broadcasting what appeared to be a distress signal. The ship's design was unfamiliar, but the energy readings were pathetically weak. Vex's tactical officer, Commander Nex, pulled up the data on the main screen. "It appears to be from the human species, Admiral," Nex reported, his voice filled with the casual disdain that all Valens felt for lesser races. "Our records show them as a primitive civilization from the Outer Rim. They barely have faster-than-light travel." Vex studied the readings with interest. The human ship was small, perhaps a tenth the size of his smallest escort vessel. Its hull showed signs of damage, and its engines were operating at minimal power, perfect for what he had in mind. "Bring us out of hyperspace," Vex ordered. "Signal the fleet to assume collection formation. We haven't had fresh specimens in months." The Valen fleet dropped back into normal space with a flash of brilliant light. Before them, floating helplessly in the void, was the human vessel. It was sleek and white, with strange markings along its hull. The ship's name was visible in alien script, UES Defiance. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Riley Hayes watched the massive alien ships materialize around her vessel. She was a woman in her 40s, with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. That had seen more combat than most soldiers twice her age. Her crew of 47 moved quietly at their stations, their faces showing none of the fear that the Valens expected from primitive humans. "Tactical, report," Hayes said softly. Lieutenant Tom Nash, her tactical officer, checked his instruments. 12 Valen warships, Admiral. The flagship is a Dominion-class dreadnought. They're moving to surround us, exactly as predicted." Hayes nodded. The humans had been studying Valen tactics for decades. They knew exactly how the arrogant aliens would respond to finding a damaged human ship. The Valens always followed the same pattern: surround, capture, study, then dispose of the specimens. "Communications, send the distress signal," Hayes ordered. The Defiance began broadcasting on all frequencies, sending out calls for help in broken English mixed with basic Valen words. To the aliens, it would sound like a primitive crew trying desperately to communicate with their superiors. The truth was very different. Aboard the Dominion's Fist, Admiral Vex smiled as he listened to the human transmissions. "They're trying to surrender," he told his bridge crew. "How pathetic. Begin tractor beam operations. Bring them into the docking bay." The massive Valen flagship extended a beam of energy that locked onto the human ship. Slowly, carefully, the Defiance was pulled toward the dreadnought's belly, where huge doors opened to receive it. The process took 20 minutes, during which the humans continued their fake distress calls. Captain Hayes watched the walls of the alien docking bay close around her ship. The bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen vessels the size of the Defiance. Alien technicians in environmental suits moved to secure the ship, while armed guards took positions around the landing area. "Perfect," Hayes said quietly. "They brought us exactly where we wanted to be." Her crew exchanged glances. They had trained for this moment for years. Every person on the ship knew their role in what was about to happen. The Valens thought they had captured a helpless human vessel. They had no idea they had just brought a weapon of incredible power into the heart of their fleet. Admiral Vex made his way to the docking bay, eager to see these primitive humans up close. He had studied their species in the past, but had never captured live specimens. Humans were known for their stubborn nature and their tendency to fight even when facing impossible odds. It would be interesting to break them, The admiral was a tall creature, nearly 8 feet in height, with 4 arms and skin that shifted between blue and purple, depending on his mood. Like all Valens, he wore elaborate armor that showed his rank and achievements. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, and they had never met a race they couldn't dominate. As Vex approached the human ship, he noticed something odd. The vessel's hull looked damaged from a distance, but up close, the metal seemed too perfect, too clean. The scorch marks that had shown on his sensors were barely visible now. Before he could think about this too deeply, the ship's airlock opened. Captain Hayes stepped out first, her hands raised in what appeared to be surrender. She was followed by 6 of her crew members, all of them human, all of them looking appropriately frightened. The Valen guards raised their weapons, but Vex waved them back. "I am Admiral Vex of the Valen Empire," he announced in heavily accented English. "You are now prisoners of the Empire. You will be questioned, studied, and then disposed of according to our laws." Hayes nodded, playing her part perfectly. "Please, we're just explorers. Our ship was damaged in an asteroid field. We're not soldiers." Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Of course you're not soldiers. Look at you. Your species is barely capable of space travel. You're nothing more than curious animals." While the Admiral spoke, his technicians were running scans on the Faz and Jew human ship. The readings were confusing. The vessel's power core was more sophisticated than their initial scans had suggested, but still far below Valen standards. The weapons systems appeared to be minimal, mostly defensive in nature. What the Valen scanners couldn't detect were the hidden systems that ran throughout the ship's hull. The Defiance looked like an exploration vessel, but it was actually one of the most advanced warships ever built by human hands. Its armor was designed to fool enemy sensors. Its weapons were concealed behind panels that perfectly matched the hull, and its power core was running at less than 1% capacity. Hayes caught the eye of Lieutenant Nash, who had remained on the bridge. She gave him the slightest nod, a signal that meant everything was proceeding according to plan. The Valens had taken the bait completely. They had brought the human ship into their formation, surrounded it with their most powerful vessels, and placed it in the perfect position to do maximum damage. The Admiral continued his speech about the superiority of the Valen Empire, completely unaware that his prisoners were quietly counting the number of guards, noting the positions of weapons, and memorizing the layout of the docking bay. These humans had spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment, and everything was going perfectly. In a few minutes, Admiral Vex would discover that humanity had been hiding its true capabilities for centuries. He would learn that bringing a human warship into close range was the last mistake his empire would ever make. But for now, he basked in his false victory, never suspecting that the real battle was about to begin. Admiral Vex was still talking about the greatness of the Valen Empire when Captain Hayes decided the show had gone on long enough. She had listened to his speech about human inferiority and primitive technology for 10 minutes, nodding at the right moments and looking properly defeated. Her crew members stood behind her with their heads down, playing their roles as captured explorers. The Admiral gestured toward the Defiance with one of his 4 arms. "Your ship will be torn apart piece by piece. We will learn everything about your pathetic technology and add it to our databases. Then we will find your home worlds and bring them into the Empire." Hayes looked up at the towering alien and smiled. It was not the smile of a frightened prisoner. It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. "Admiral," she said calmly, "there's something you should know about human technology." Before Vex could respond, Hayes pressed a small device hidden in her palm. The signal traveled instantly to Lieutenant Nash on the Defiance bridge. Nash had been waiting for this moment his entire career. His fingers moved over the control panel with practiced precision. The first thing that happened was the sound. A deep humming filled the docking bay as the Defiant's power core came online at full capacity. The gentle vibration that the Valens had ignored suddenly became a roar that shook the entire flagship. Warning lights began flashing on Valen control panels throughout the ship. Commander Nex, still on the bridge of the Dominion's fist, stared at his instruments in confusion. "Admiral, we're getting massive energy readings from the human vessel. Power levels are increasing beyond anything in our databases." Admiral Vex turned toward the Defiance just as the outer hull began to change. Panels that had looked like simple metal plating slid away with mechanical precision. Underneath were weapons that no human ship was supposed to possess. But these weren't just any weapons. They were Valen weapons, improved and modified in ways that made Vex's blood run cold. "Impossible," he whispered. "Those are our plasma cannons. Our particle beams. How do you have our technology?" Hayes walked closer to the stunned Admiral. "We've been watching you for a very long time, Vex. Every time your scouts found a human world, every time you cataloged our species as primitive and harmless, we were learning. We took your discarded technology, your battle wreckage, even your waste products. We studied everything." The Defiance weapon systems came online with a series of mechanical clicks that echoed through the docking bay. But the ship didn't fire yet. Nash was waiting for the second part of the plan to activate. Lieutenant Emma Cole, the ship's chief engineer, sat at a console that looked nothing like the simple controls the Valens expected from primitive humans. Her screen showed a three-dimensional map of the entire Valen fleet, with data streams flowing between all 12 ships. The aliens had made their vessels work together as one giant network, sharing information and coordinating their attacks. It was an impressive system that had helped them conquer the galaxy. It was also their greatest weakness. "Initiating viral upload," Cole announced quietly. Her fingers danced over controls that were built specifically to interface with Valen technology. The humans had spent decades learning how the alien networks functioned. Now they were going to turn that knowledge into a weapon. The virus spread through the Valen fleet faster than their computers could detect it. It was designed to look like normal communication data, so the alien security systems ignored it completely. Within seconds, every ship in the formation was infected. Commander Nex watched his control panels begin to malfunction. "Admiral, we're losing system control across the fleet. Something is interfering with our networks." On the escort vessel Void Hunter, Captain Beck stared in horror as his weapons turned toward his own allies. His gunner pressed the firing controls, but nothing happened. The targeting system had locked onto the ship next to them and wouldn't respond to commands. "What's happening?" Beck shouted to his technical crew. "Why won't the weapons respond?" The same scene was playing out across the entire Valen fleet. Ships that had worked in perfect coordination for decades were now pointing guns at each other. Their own technology had been turned against them by an enemy they had dismissed as harmless. Back in the docking bay, Admiral Vex was beginning to understand the scope of what was happening. "You've been planning this for years," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. "Decades," Hayes corrected. "The first human your people encountered was over 50 years ago. We've been preparing for this moment ever since." The Admiral reached for his sidearm, but Hayes was faster. She drew a weapon that looked exactly like a Valen plasma pistol, except it was smaller and more efficient. "I wouldn't recommend that." "Admiral, this used to be one of your guns. We made some improvements." Vex's guards raised their weapons, but they found themselves facing not just Hayes and her 6 crew members, but dozens of humans who had quietly emerged from hidden compartments. Throughout the docking bay, the Valens had been so focused on the obvious prisoners that they had missed the real threat. Lieutenant Nash's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain, viral upload complete. We have control of their fleet network. All Valen vessels are experiencing system malfunctions." Hayes nodded. Excellent work, Nash. Begin Phase 2. The Defiance weapon systems fired for the first time, but not at the docking bay walls or the flagship's hull. Instead, precise energy beams struck specific targets throughout the Valen fleet. The ship's computers had analyzed every vessel in the formation and identified their most critical systems. Engine cores, weapons control centers, communication arrays, all were disabled with surgical precision. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Valen ships. They were capturing them. Admiral Vex watched through the docking bay's transparent aluminum windows as his mighty fleet became helpless in a matter of minutes. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were now drifting powerless in space. Some tried to flee, but their engines had been disabled. Others attempted to send distress signals, but their communications had been jammed. "This is impossible," Vex said, his purple skin turning dark with rage. "You're primitives. You don't have the technology for this kind of operation." Hayes smiled again. "That's where you're wrong, Admiral. We do have the technology, yours. We've been improving it while you've been sitting back and feeling superior." Engineer Cole's voice came through the communication system. "Captain, we've successfully downloaded the complete Valen database. Ship designs, weapon specifications, star maps, everything. We know the location of every Valen world and military installation." The full scope of the human plan was now clear to Admiral Vex. This wasn't just an attack on his fleet. It was the beginning of something much larger. The humans had used his own arrogance against him, allowing themselves to be captured so they could strike from the inside. Hayes looked at the defeated Admiral and spoke the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "You made one fatal mistake, Vex. You assumed that being patient meant being weak. Now you're going to help us teach that lesson to the rest of your empire." The news of Admiral Vex's defeat reached the Valen capital world of Valos Prime within 6 hours. High Commander Vex stood in the central command room of the Imperial Palace, staring at the emergency reports streaming across dozens of screens. Each message brought worse news than the last. 12 ships lost, reported his aide, a young Valen named Cole. "The entire Fourth Fleet has gone silent. Last transmission showed all vessels under human control." Vex's 4 arms trembled with rage. In 2,000 years of empire, no single enemy vessel had ever defeated an entire Valen fleet. The humans were supposed to be primitives, barely capable of space travel. Yet somehow they had outsmarted his best admiral and captured his most powerful ships. "How is this possible?" Vex demanded. "Our intelligence reports showed humans using basic technology. Chemical rockets, simple computers, weak weapons." Cole pulled up the latest analysis on his tablet. "Sir, our technicians have been studying the transmissions from the battle. It appears the humans have been hiding their true capabilities for decades. They've been using our own technology against us." The High Commander studied the data with growing horror. The human ship had used Valen weapons, Valen communication systems, even Valen power cores. But everything had been improved, made more efficient. The primitives had taken his technology and made it better. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Vex ordered. "No human vessel is to be approached under any circumstances. Destroy them from maximum range." But even as he gave the order, Vex knew it was too late. The damage had already been done. News of the defeat was spreading across the galaxy faster than his military could contain it. The Valen Empire's greatest weapon had always been fear. Now that fear was cracking, on the industrial world of Kepler-7, the local Valen governor received an urgent transmission. The message came on frequencies that only the Empire was supposed to use, but the voice speaking was human. "Captain." Hayes appeared on the screen, standing on what was clearly the bridge of a Valen warship. "People of Kepler-7, Hayes said calmly. "My name is Captain Riley Hayes of the Human Defense Force. I'm speaking to you from the bridge of the former Valen flagship Dominion's Fist. Admiral Vex and his entire fleet have been defeated by a single human vessel. The governor, a fat Valan named Rix, stared at the screen in disbelief. Behind Hayes, he could see human technicians working at Valan control stations. The bridge that had once belonged to the Empire's most feared admiral was now under human control. "This is impossible," Rix whispered. "Humans don't have the technology for space warfare." Hayes smiled on the screen. "Governor Rix, we know all about your slave labor camps on Kepler-7. We know about the mining quotas that are killing your workers. We know about the children you've separated from their families. All of that ends now." The transmission cut off, leaving Rix staring at a blank screen. Within minutes, his communication officers were reporting similar broadcasts across dozens of worlds. The humans weren't just announcing their victory. They were calling for revolution. On Kepler-7, the forced laborers in the mining camps had gathered around hidden communication devices to listen to the human broadcast. Most of them were from species that had been conquered by the Valans generations ago. They had lived their entire lives under the Empire's boot, believing that resistance was impossible. A young woman named Lyra, whose people had been enslaved for 3 generations, stood up in the middle of the crowd. "Did you hear that?" she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "The humans defeated an entire Valan fleet with 1 ship. If they can do that, maybe we can fight back too." The crowd murmured agreement. For the first time in decades, the slaves were talking about freedom instead of survival. The psychological impact of the human victory was spreading like wildfire. Back on the captured flagship, Captain Hayes walked through corridors that had once belonged to the Empire's military elite. Her crew was busy learning how to operate Valan systems, but they weren't just studying the technology. They were improving it. Lieutenant Nash approached with a report. "Captain, we've completed analysis of the Valan fleet database. Their entire military network is connected through a central command system. If we can access it, we can coordinate attacks across the galaxy." Has nodded. "That's exactly what we're going to do, Nash. But first, we need to show the galaxy that the Empire can be beaten." Engineer Cole was working at a station that had been designed for Valan hands, but she had adapted it for human use. "Captain, I've been studying their ship designs. The Valans have made their vessels too dependent on central control. They can't function properly without constant communication with command centers." "Which means?" Hayes asked. "Which means that if we can disrupt their communication network, their entire military becomes helpless. Ships won't know where to go or what to do. It'll be chaos." Hayes considered this information. The humans had spent 50 years preparing for war against the Valan Empire, but they had never intended to fight it the way the Valans expected. Instead of building bigger ships or more powerful weapons, they had studied their enemies' weaknesses and prepared to exploit them. "Cole, I want you to design a virus that can spread through their entire communication network. Something that will cause maximum confusion without completely destroying their systems." "Already working on it, Captain. We'll need to upload it from multiple points to ensure it spreads properly. Then we'll need more ships," Hayes said. "Nash, what's the status on the captured fleet?" Nash checked his tablet. 7 ships are fully operational under our control. The other 5 need repairs, but they'll be ready within 48 hours. We've also been analyzing their crew quarters and supply systems. These ships were designed for long-range missions. Hayes smiled. "Perfect. We're going to take this fleet and visit some of the Empire's most important worlds. Not to conquer them, but to show everyone that the Valans can be defeated." Meanwhile, on Valos Prime, High Commander Vex was receiving reports that made his worst fears come true. The humans weren't just content with their single victory. They were using the captured ships to attack Valan installations across the galaxy. "Sir," Cole reported, "we've lost contact with the mining world of Kepler-7. The garrison there has gone silent. We're also receiving reports of uprisings on 12 other worlds. Vex's skin turned dark purple with rage. "How many ships do we have available for immediate deployment?" "Approximately 300 vessels, sir. But they're scattered across the galaxy. It would take weeks to assemble a proper fleet." "Then start assembling it now," Vex ordered. "And send a message to all planetary governors. Any world that shows signs of rebellion is to be pacified immediately. Use whatever force is necessary." But even as Vex gave his orders, he knew that the Empire was facing its greatest crisis in 2,000 years. The humans had done more than defeat a single fleet. They had shown the galaxy that the mighty Valan Empire could be beaten. And once that fear was gone, there was no telling how far the rebellion would spread. On distant worlds across the galaxy, slaves were breaking their chains and prisoners were escaping from their cells. The human victory had given them something they had never had before: hope. And hope, as the Valans were about to learn, was the most dangerous weapon of all. 3 weeks after the capture of Admiral Vex's fleet, the Valan Empire was falling apart faster than anyone had imagined possible. High Commander Vex stood in his war room, surrounded by reports of rebellions, lost worlds, and defeated fleets. The map of the galaxy that had once shown solid Valan control now flickered with red warning lights on hundreds of systems. "Sir, we've lost 17 more worlds in the Outer Rim," reported Commander Cole, his voice tired from delivering bad news for days. "The rebels aren't just random uprisings anymore. They're coordinated, well-armed, and using our own tactics against us." Vex studied the tactical display with growing desperation. Every world that fell to the rebellion was using Valan weapons and Valan ships. The humans had somehow managed to arm entire populations with their own military equipment. "How are they getting our technology to so many worlds so quickly?" "The humans, sir. They're not just using the ships they captured. Intelligence reports show they've built hidden factories throughout the galaxy. They've been manufacturing our weapons for years, but making them better." The High Commander's forearms clenched into fists. The humans had been planning this revolution for decades, maybe centuries. While the Valans had grown fat and lazy on their conquests, the primitives had been working in secret, preparing for this moment. "What about our ultimate weapons?" Vex asked. "The planet killers?" Cole hesitated before answering. "Sir, we activated the Dreadnought Death's Hand 3 days ago. It was ordered to destroy the rebellion on Kepler 7. And the ship is missing, sir. Last transmission showed it turning toward the Valan system of Core Prime instead of the rebel world." Vex felt cold fear creep up his spine. Core Prime was one of the Empire's most important military worlds, home to over 2 billion Valans. Missing? How does a planet-killing dreadnought go missing? Before Cole could answer, the communication system activated. Captain Hayes appeared on the screen, but she wasn't standing on the bridge of the captured flagship anymore. Behind her was the command center of Death's Hand, the Empire's most feared weapon. "High Commander Vex," Hayes said with a calm smile. "I thought you should know that your ultimate weapon is now under human control, along with its crew of 3,000. Valans who have decided they'd rather live free than die for your empire." Vex stared at the screen in horror. "That's impossible. The Death's Hand has loyalty implants. The crew cannot disobey orders." "You're right," Hayes agreed. "They can't disobey Valan orders. But they can choose to follow human orders instead. Especially when we offer them something you never did: freedom and respect." The transmission showed Valan crew members working alongside humans at control stations. They weren't prisoners or slaves. They were volunteers who had chosen to join the rebellion against their own empire. "You see, Vex, we've learned something about your people that you never understood yourselves. Most Valans don't actually want to be conquerors. They want to live peaceful lives, raise their families, and explore the galaxy. Your empire has been forcing them to be soldiers in wars they never wanted to fight." Vex's skin turned black with rage. "You're lying." The Valen people support the Empire. Do they? Hayes asked. When was the last time you asked them? When did you last hold an election or allow free speech? Your people follow you because they're afraid, not because they believe in your cause. The transmission cut off, leaving Vex staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff exchanged nervous glances. The human had spoken truths that no one in the palace dared to voice. On the former Death's Hand, now renamed Liberation, Captain Hayes walked through corridors filled with both humans and Valens working together. The Valen crew members had been shocked to discover that humans didn't treat prisoners as slaves or specimens. Instead, they offered them choices, Commander Tool. The Valen officer who had been second in command of the Death's Hand approached Hayes with a report. His skin showed the green tint of someone who was nervous but determined. Captain Hayes, we've completed the modifications to the ship's weapon systems. The planet-killing weapons have been converted to terraforming tools. Instead of destroying worlds, we can now make barren planets suitable for life. Hayes nodded approvingly. Excellent work, Tool. What about the communication virus? Ready for deployment across the Valen network. Once we activate it, every military communication in the Empire will be compromised. Their fleets won't be able to coordinate attacks or receive orders. Hayes looked out the ship's main viewing window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Valen Empire was preparing its final desperate counterattack. Intelligence reports showed them gathering their remaining fleets for one massive assault, designed to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. They're going to throw everything they have at us, she said to Lieutenant Nash, who had joined her at the window. Are we ready? Nash asked. We've been ready for 50 years, Hayes replied. But this next phase is going to test everything we've planned. The human fleet had grown far beyond what anyone had expected. The 7 captured Valen ships had become 70 as more worlds joined the rebellion. But these weren't just stolen vessels. Human engineers had been improving every ship, making them faster, stronger, and more efficient than their original designs. Engineer Cole approached with the latest technical reports. Captain, we've finished analyzing the Valen hyperspace network. Their entire military depends on a series of communication relays spread throughout the galaxy. If we can capture or destroy the central relay station, we can cut off all military communication. Where is it located? Hayes asked. Valos Prime, the capital world. It's buried deep underneath the Imperial Palace. Hayes considered this information. An attack on the capital world would force the Empire to commit all their remaining forces to its defense. It would be the final battle of the war, with everything decided in one massive engagement. How many ships do we have available? She asked Nash. 230 vessels under direct human command. Another 400 rebel ships from various species. But the Valens still have over 1,000 ships spread across their remaining territory. Numbers don't matter if they can't coordinate their attacks, Hayes said. Cole, how long do you need to prepare the communication virus for galaxy-wide deployment? 6 hours, Captain. But we'll need to get close to Valos Prime to upload it to their central network. Hayes smiled. Then that's exactly what we're going to do. Send a message to all rebel fleets. We're going to end this war where it started, with the Valens underestimating what humans can accomplish. As the Liberation and its fleet prepared for hyperspace jumped toward the capital world, similar preparations were taking place on Valos Prime. High Commander Vex had recalled every available ship to defend the heart of the Empire. Over 800 Valen warships formed defensive lines around their home world. This time we'll be ready for them, Vex told his assembled admirals. No more surprises, no more tricks. We'll destroy them with overwhelming firepower. But even as he spoke, Vex couldn't shake the feeling that the humans had planned for this moment, too. They had been 3 steps ahead throughout the entire war. What made him think they wouldn't have a strategy for the final battle as well? The final battle for Valos Prime began not with weapons fire, but with words. Captain Hayes stood on the bridge of the Liberation as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valen home system. Before them waited over 800 enemy warships arranged in perfect defensive formations around their capital world. "Open a channel to all ships in the system," Hayes ordered, "both human and Valen." The communication system crackled to life, broadcasting on every frequency used by military vessels. Hayes knew that every Valen in the system would hear her words, from High Commander Vex in his palace to the youngest recruit manning a weapons station. "People of the Valen Empire," she began, her voice calm but carrying across space to hundreds of thousands of listeners. "My name is Captain Riley Hayes. 6 months ago, you thought humans were primitive creatures barely capable of space travel. Today, your empire is crumbling and your fleets are joining our cause. But this war doesn't have to end in destruction." On the bridge of the Valen flagship Emperor's Will, High Commander Vex listened with growing anger. Around him, his bridge crew seemed uncertain, their usual confidence shaken by months of defeats. "We offer every Valen the same choice we've offered to your people throughout this war," Hayes continued. "Join us in building a galaxy where all species are free and equal. Or continue following leaders who see you as nothing more than tools for conquest." Vex activated his own communication system. "Human Captain, you are speaking to the rightful rulers of this galaxy. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. I'm sorry you feel that way, Vex, but your people deserve better than living under the boot of tyrants." Hayes nodded to Engineer Cole, who activated the communication virus that had been months in the making. The signal spread through the Valen military network like wildfire, but this time it carried more than just computer code. It carried the voices of Valen crew members who had joined the rebellion. Commander Toole, the former Valen officer now serving on the Liberation, spoke directly to his former comrades. "This is Commander Toole of the ship formerly known as Death's Hand. I speak to you as a proud Valen who has chosen freedom over fear. The humans don't want to destroy us. They want to free us from an empire that has made us into monsters." Across the Valen fleet, officers and crew members listened as their own people described life under human leadership. They heard about Valen colonies that had joined the rebellion and were now governing themselves. They learned about former enemy worlds working together to explore the galaxy instead of conquering it. "All ships, prepare for attack," Vex ordered, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Some of his captains responded immediately, but others hesitated. The virus was doing more than disrupting communications. It was spreading doubt. The battle began when the Valen outer defense line opened fire on the approaching human fleet. But the attack was disorganized, with some ships firing while others held back. The carefully planned defensive formation began to fall apart as individual captains made their own decisions about whether to fight. Captain Hayes had expected this. The humans had studied Valen psychology for decades, and they knew that the alien empire's greatest weakness was its dependence on absolute authority. Once that authority was questioned, the entire system began to collapse. "All ships, engage defensive maneuvers only," Hayes ordered her fleet. "Do not fire unless fired upon. Let them see that we're not here to destroy them." The human and rebel ships moved through the Valen defenses like water flowing around rocks. When Valen vessels attacked, the humans defended themselves with precise, minimal force. When Valen ships held their fire, the humans simply flew past them toward the capital world. On Valos Prime, panic was spreading through the Imperial Palace. Reports came in of Valen ships refusing orders, of entire squadrons breaking formation, of captains demanding to speak directly with High Commander Vex instead of following attack orders. "Sir, we're losing control of the fleet," Commander Cole reported, his voice shaking. "Half our ships are no longer responding to commands." Vex stared at the tactical display, showing his once mighty fleet dissolving into chaos. Ships that had fought together for decades were now pointing weapons at each other. The human virus hadn't just disrupted their communications. It had exposed the cracks that had been growing in the Empire for generations. "Activate the planetary defense grid," Vex ordered desperately. "If the fleet won't protect the capital, the planet will defend itself." But when the massive weapon systems around Valos Prime came online, they didn't target the approaching human fleet. Instead, they turned toward the Imperial Palace itself. Engineer Cole's virus had infected every system connected to the military network, including the planet's own defenses. "Sir," Cole said quietly, "the defense grid is targeting the palace. If we don't shut down the network, it will fire on us." Vex realized that he had been completely outmaneuvered. The humans had turned his own weapons against him without firing. A single shot. Every system he depended on had been compromised. Every weapon he trusted had been turned into a tool for his enemies. The Liberation landed in the palace courtyard without a single shot being fired in defense. Captain Hayes walked up the steps of the building that had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years, followed by a mixed group of humans and Valans who had chosen freedom over empire. She found High Commander Vex in his throne room, sitting alone, among the symbols of imperial power. His skin had turned pale gray, the color of defeat and resignation. "It's over," she said simply. Vex looked up at the human who had destroyed his empire. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day we first learned about your empire," Hayes replied. "We spent 300 years preparing for this moment. Every interaction, every time your scouts cataloged us as primitive, every time you dismissed us as harmless, we were learning about you." "What happens now?" Vex asked. "Will you rule the galaxy as we did?" Hayes shook her head. "We're not here to rule anyone. We're here to make sure no one rules anyone else. The galaxy will govern itself through democratic councils representing all species equally." Over the following months, the Terran Accord was established with representatives from hundreds of worlds. The Valan Empire's authoritarian structure was replaced by a federation where every species had a voice. Former slave worlds became equal partners in exploring and developing the galaxy. Admiral Vex, released from his prison on the Liberation, stood with Captain Hayes on the observation deck of a new exploration vessel. The ship was crewed by humans, Valans, and dozens of other species working together as equals. "I still don't understand how you did it," Vex admitted. "How did you defeat an empire that had conquered the galaxy?" Hayes looked out at the stars where new colonies were being established by free peoples working together. "We never tried to defeat your empire, Vex. We just showed your people that they didn't have to live in fear anymore. Once they stopped being afraid, the empire defeated itself." The exploration ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its diverse crew toward unknown regions of the galaxy. Behind them, the Terran Accord was sending similar ships in every direction, not to conquer new worlds, but to offer friendship and knowledge to any species they encountered. The age of empire was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it had all started with a single human warship that the Valans had foolishly allowed to get too close.